The Williams family vanished. But what two hikers found 8 years later in Devil's Canyon will haunt your every thought. She never thought she'd hear the wind again. Not like this. The way it howled through Devil's Canyon that day. The last sound she remembered before everything disappeared. Her name was Megan Williams. The first child of the Willems. A child when it happened. Her voice would shake years later when she finally spoke about it. But she always started the same way. I was just a kid when we vanished in that canyon. They left just before sunset, her mom, dad, little brother, and Megan. What should have been a short hike turned into something else. The trail disappeared. The birds stopped singing. The canyon went quiet. And Megan started hearing voices. Not from her family. From the rocks. She was separated from them during the panic. They were shouting, running. But she froze, hiding in the shadows, too afraid to move. She didn't know what happened to them. Only that the canyon had taken them. But then, something strange. The voices in the canyon, the whispers, began to guide her. Run. She didn't know where she was going. She just followed the pull. A narrow gap between the rocks appeared. And somehow, she slipped through. She emerged hours later, filthy, trembling, alone. A group of hikers found her. Took her to safety. But safety was a lie. Because Megan never really left the canyon. Not entirely. The voices stayed with her. In her sleep. In silence. In the back of her mind. For years she tried to move on. But the canyon was an addiction. A shadow always at her heels. It hadn't finished with her. People say she escaped. But ask Megan. She'll tell you. The canyon let her go, so she could come back. And when she does, it won't be empty. It never was. Ryan had always felt drawn to Devil's Canyon, even before the disappearance of his family. There was something about the place that seemed to beckon him, something that whispered through the wind and the rocks, urging him to uncover its truths. But this time it was personal. He wasn't just here for the thrill or the challenge of the unknown, he was here to make things right. Ryan stared at the jagged cliffs ahead. They looked the same as they had in the photos, the ones taken after the family vanished. Same rocky walls, same sharp drop-offs, same haunting beauty. But now they felt different. A heavy weight pressed down on his chest. The memories of that day 8 years ago surged through his mind. He wasn't just a former detective now. He was family. The younger brother of the missing father. The uncle of the 2 children. They had disappeared into this hellhole, leaving behind only unanswered questions and a trail of sorrow. But Ryan wasn't just haunted by the disappearance. He was driven by the need for closure. Something the authorities couldn't offer him. Something the police hadn't found in their endless searches. He had always felt there was something off about the case. And it was in the back of his mind, gnawing at him for years, that there was something more at play than a simple disappearance. With him was Megan, no longer just a survivor of the events, but his ally in this quest. Megan hadn't set foot in the canyon since she was just a child. She wasn't ready for the memories, but the fact that she'd agreed to come along meant everything. She told herself she wasn't looking for answers, not after everything that had happened. But deep down she knew she had to confront the canyon. It was the only way she could ever truly move on. The wind kicked up again, biting through the air as Ryan and Megan stood at the edge of Devil's Canyon, staring into the jagged expanse that seemed to stretch forever. The canyon had an unnatural quiet to it, too quiet as if it were holding its breath. Ryan's boots crunched against the gravel as he took the first step forward, his flashlight cutting through the deepening darkness. Behind him, Megan hesitated, her eyes tracing the rugged cliffs. She could feel it, the pull of the place, the weight of the past settling over them both. Ryan didn't speak. He didn't need to. He had been here before, many times in his mind. But now it felt different. The air was heavier, the rocks more menacing, the silence more oppressive. And somewhere, deep within the maze of stone, lay the answers that had eluded him for 8 long years. Megan shifted uneasily beside him, pulling her jacket tighter around her. The canyon had never been a place she wanted to return to. The memories of that day, the day her family disappeared, still haunted her like a shadow that never quite left. But this was the only way. There was no other choice but to face it, to confront the dark pull that had led them both here. Ready? Ryan's voice broke the silence. He didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed ahead, toward the winding trail that had once led his family into the unknown. He knew it wasn't just a search for them anymore. It was something bigger. Something he had to prove. Megan nodded, but the words stuck in her throat. There was no easy way to say it, to tell him that, in her heart, she wasn't sure they were going to find what they were looking for. She only spoke when she had to. "I'm not sure I'm ready," she whispered. Ryan's expression softened for a moment, the ghost of regret flashing in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "We have to be." They stepped forward, the faint crunch of their footsteps swallowed by the vastness of the canyon. The trail twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the rocky labyrinth. With every step, the canyon seemed to narrow, the walls rising higher around them like an ancient fortress, guarding its secrets. Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time felt irrelevant in this place, where the weight of silence was as thick as the night. They followed the trail until it became barely a suggestion, the path all but consumed by thick underbrush and sharp rocks. Ryan pushed forward, though his steps slowed, his mind whirling. There were no signs, no clues, nothing to suggest they were anywhere near where the Williams family had gone missing all those years ago. Then the first clue appeared. At first, it was barely noticeable, just a faint outline of something half buried in the dirt. Ryan crouched down, his hands trembling slightly as he brushed aside the dirt. There, hidden beneath the ground, was a small metal object, a compass. It gleamed in the moonlight, its edges worn, its needle still stubbornly pointing north. A chill ran down his spine. The initials W were etched into the back of the compass. The same initials as the family he had lost. His brother, his sister-in-law, his niece, his nephew. They had never been found, and yet here was a piece of their story waiting for him to uncover. Megan stepped forward slowly, her breath catching when she saw what Ryan was holding. This can't be real," she whispered. Ryan didn't answer. His fingers closed tightly around the compass as he stood. The weight of it felt like a silent accusation, like the canyon itself was mocking him for taking so long to uncover the truth. They were here. They were here. The thought repeated in his mind over and over again. The silence between them grew heavier. Megan's voice barely broke the quiet. "What do we do now?" Ryan didn't have an answer. The compass wasn't enough to explain what had happened to the Williams family, but it was a sign. They weren't just searching for answers anymore. They were chasing something far darker. And with every step they took into the canyon, it felt as if they were being pulled further away from the truth, deeper into its heart. As they continued on, the wind picked up again, this time colder than before. The canyon was alive with sound now. The rustle of dry leaves, the scrape of rocks shifting beneath their feet, the faintest whisper on the wind. And beneath it all, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. Ryan didn't look back. They couldn't afford to. Not now. The canyon stretched ahead, endless and unyielding, like a maze that never meant for them to find their way out. Ryan's flashlight flickered as he scanned the path ahead, his every instinct screaming that something was off. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, the weight of the silence pressing on them. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, as if the canyon itself was closing in, refusing to let them leave. Megan walked beside him, her every step careful, eyes darting to the shadows that seemed to dance just beyond the light's reach. She hadn't spoken much since they found the compass. She hadn't needed to. Her mind was running in circles, the implications of that small object too vast to comprehend. It was more than just a clue. It was a message. Someone had been here, someone who knew exactly what they were doing, and they had left this for Ryan to find. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "Ryan, we need to be careful," Megan said, her voice tight with unease. "The farther we go, the more I feel like we're not alone." Ryan didn't look at her. He didn't need to. He could feel it too, the sense of being pulled deeper into something he couldn't yet understand. The compass was only the beginning, but it was a sign that the answers were closer than they realized. "I know," he muttered. "But we can't stop now. We have to know what happened." They pressed on, the canyon growing narrower as they made their way through a particularly treacherous stretch of rocky terrain. The trail became harder to follow, the ground uneven and jagged beneath their boots. Every step felt heavier, as if the weight of the canyon itself was pushing them forward. And then they found it. It was almost hidden, buried beneath a pile of broken rocks and debris. Another clue. This time it was a piece of cloth, torn and stained, barely visible among the rubble. Ryan knelt down, his heart pounding in his chest as he reached for it. The fabric was dark red, almost black, and it had a strange, almost unnatural sheen to it, as though it had been exposed to some kind of fire. Megan stepped forward cautiously, her eyes narrowing when she saw what Ryan had found. "Is that one of their jackets?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Ryan didn't answer at first. He could barely breathe as he examined the cloth. It was torn in places like it had been ripped away in a struggle, and there were faint scorch marks along the edges. The fabric seemed to hum with an energy he couldn't explain. "We need to go further," Ryan said, his voice tense. "This isn't just a clue. It's a message." The wind shifted, carrying a strange acrid scent that sent a shiver down Megan's spine. The air felt charged now, electric with something unspoken. They were no longer just following a trail, they were being led. They continued on, their steps quicker now, driven by the sense that they were about to uncover something much darker than either of them had prepared for. As they neared the next bend in the canyon, the ground ahead seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Ryan slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the rocks, looking for any sign of what lay ahead. And then he saw it. A structure partially hidden behind the jagged cliffs, barely visible but unmistakably out of place. It looked like an old shack, its wooden frame splintered and decayed, but the door was ajar, hanging loosely on rusted hinges. Megan's breath caught in her throat. What the hell is that? Ryan's mind raced as he approached the shack, every instinct telling him to turn back. But there was no going back now. He stepped inside, the door creaking loudly in the silence, and the scent of stale air hit him immediately. The interior was dark, cluttered with debris and forgotten remnants of something long abandoned. And then in the corner of the room a faint glow caught his eye. It was a candle, its flame flickering weakly in the stillness, casting long shadows on the walls. The scent of burnt wax filled the air, and as Ryan moved closer his heart skipped a beat. There on the ground beneath the candle was a set of old photographs scattered across the floor. He bent down, his fingers trembling as he picked one up. The faces staring back at him were familiar. Too familiar. It was his family, the Williams family, but this was a photo Ryan had never seen before. They were standing in front of a cave, a dark entrance looming behind them. And in the background, barely visible, were two figures watching them. The hairs on the back of Ryan's neck stood on end. Megan gasped behind him. "Ryan, this isn't right. We need to leave. Now." Ryan didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the photograph, the pieces of the puzzle finally coming together in his mind. The canyon was hiding something far darker than he had imagined. They had come for answers. But what they had found was something far worse. The air in the shack was suffocating, thick with the stench of decay. Ryan stood motionless, staring at the photograph in his hand, his breath shallow. Megan's voice came from behind him, barely a whisper. "What is this? What does it mean?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing. The photo. It wasn't just a memory, it was evidence, a key to something far worse than he had ever imagined. The photograph of his family, his brother, his sister-in-law, his niece and nephew, standing in front of that cave staring into the abyss. Behind them, barely visible in the shadows, were two figures. Watching them. The hairs on his neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. The presence of those figures. They weren't just bystanders. They were waiting. Waiting for something. Megan stepped forward, peering over his shoulder. "Uncle Ryan, I'm scared. What is this place?" The question hung in the air like a weight. The shack, the candle, the photo, it was all part of something bigger. Something they weren't supposed to find. The faint whisper of wind brushed against the shack, and for the briefest moment Ryan thought he heard something else. A voice. Faint but unmistakable. "Get out." He spun around, his heart racing. Nothing. The shack was empty, save for the debris scattered across the floor. But the voice, it hadn't been his imagination. He could feel it. The presence in the air pushing them to leave. But they weren't leaving. Ryan stood, gripping the photo tighter. "This isn't over." Megan's face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Uncle Ryan, we need to get out of here. Now." Ryan shook his head. He wasn't leaving. Not yet. There was too much at stake. They had come this far and now the truth was within reach. He could almost taste it. The feeling of something just beyond his grasp, something he had to understand before it consumed him completely. He turned his attention back to the photographs. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye caught his attention. The candlelight danced as if disturbed by an invisible hand. The sound was sharp, clear, like a twig breaking underfoot. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. The photo in his hand wasn't the only one. More pictures were scattered on the floor, each one depicting his family at different points in time, all taken in this same spot. But there was a pattern. A shift in the faces, a change in their expressions. They looked different, darker. And in each photo, a shadow stood in the background, just behind them, never visible enough to identify. Ryan's hands shook as he dropped the photo he was holding and reached for another. His eyes scanned it quickly. This time it was his brother. A photo of him standing alone, his face drawn tight in fear. In the distance, a figure stood, barely visible, watching from the shadows. "Uncle Ryan," Megan said, her voice shaking. "We need to leave. Something's here. We're not alone." Ryan didn't respond. He was too fixated on the photos, too consumed by the overwhelming realization that the answers they sought were buried beneath layers of secrets. The family had been here, but they had never left. The truth was in these photos. And someone, or something, had been watching them the whole time. The presence wasn't gone. It was still here, watching. Suddenly, a loud bang came from the direction of the door. Megan screamed, grabbing Ryan's arm. "Did you hear that?" Ryan whipped around. The door was still slightly ajar, but it was no longer empty. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the dim light of the canyon, was a figure. Tall, cloaked in shadows. Ryan's breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move. He just stood there, watching. "Leave," the figure's voice echoed, deep and cold. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. He knew they weren't alone anymore. And whatever this figure was, it was here for one reason: to stop them from uncovering the truth. The figure in the doorway didn't move. Ryan's pulse thundered in his ears, every nerve screaming for him to run. Megan gripped his arm tighter, her breath shallow and fast, her eyes locked on the figure that loomed just beyond the door. For a long moment neither side spoke. The wind howled outside, rattling the shack. The figure's silhouette was sharp, impossible to ignore. The air felt too thick, like time itself had come to a standstill. "Leave," the figure repeated, its voice low, harsh, like gravel being scraped against stone. It was a command, not a suggestion. Ryan swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. His fingers wrapped tightly around the broken edge of the photograph. The door creaked on its hinges, but he didn't take his eyes off the figure. The truth, whatever it was right in front of him. He could feel it in his bones. The figure's head tilted slightly, as though it could sense Ryan's defiance. Then, with a slow and deliberate motion, it stepped forward. The light from the candle flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. "We are the keepers of the canyon's secrets," the figure said. "You were not meant to find them." Megan's breath caught. "Uncle Ryan, this isn't right. We need to go, now." Ryan didn't move. He couldn't. His feet felt like they were stuck to the floor. He had to know who this was. He had to know why the canyon was keeping secrets. Secrets about his family. About what happened to them. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the shack, like the very ground was shifting beneath them. Megan jumped, but Ryan stayed rooted to the spot, his mind racing. Without warning, the figure stepped aside, its form dissolving into the shadows, leaving the doorway empty once more. A cold gust of wind rushed into the shack, extinguishing the candle in a single breath. "You're too late," the figure's voice echoed, now distant, fading. "They've already found you." Ryan and Megan stood in the dark, the silence deafening in the wake of the figure's departure. Ryan's chest tightened. The air in the shack felt heavier now, as if the very walls were closing in on them. Megan turned to him, her face pale with fear. "Uncle Ryan, what is this? What is going on?" Ryan didn't answer at first. He wasn't sure he could. The truth was starting to surface, but the pieces didn't fit. His mind reeled, struggling to connect the dots. The photograph, the shadowy figures in the background, the warnings. It was all too much to process at once. But one thing was clear. They weren't just dealing with a missing family anymore. Something far darker was involved. Something ancient, hidden beneath the canyon's surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. Megan's voice cut through his thoughts, trembling. "Uncle Ryan, tell me what happened to them. Tell me what's going on." Ryan took a deep breath. He knew now that the answers wouldn't come easily. But the truth was something that had been buried here in this very canyon for years. And he had to dig deeper to uncover it. With a steadying exhale, he spoke the words he had been avoiding. "They're still here, Megan. The family, they never left." Megan's eyes widened. "What do you mean? How?" Ryan's voice dropped to a whisper. "I don't know. But whatever's happening here, it's been happening for years. The canyon isn't just a place. It's something more." Megan stared at him, her eyes filled with disbelief, but also with a growing realization. The canyon was more than a backdrop for the tragedy. It was a force, something that had a hold on everything that had happened here. And it wasn't going to let them leave until they uncovered the truth. The darkness in the shack seemed to stretch on forever, pressing in on them from all sides. The wind had died down, but the air was thick with tension, as if the very earth around them was holding its breath. Ryan stood frozen, his mind reeling from the figure's cryptic words. "They've already found you." He couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, something had changed, and they were no longer in control of this search. The canyon had its own rules, its own twisted logic, and they had just stepped too far into its grip. "We have to go," Megan's voice broke the silence. It was shaky, her fear palpable, but Ryan didn't respond. He couldn't. He was staring at the photograph again, the one with his family standing near that cave. The same place. He could almost feel it, like a magnetic pull drawing him in. But why? What was it about this cave? His thoughts were interrupted by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as the sound grew louder. Someone was coming. They weren't alone. Ryan reached for Megan, his eyes scanning the shadows, but she was already looking toward the door. The crackling silence of the shack had been replaced by something much more ominous. Suddenly, the floor beneath them groaned, like the canyon was shifting, adjusting itself to reveal a secret it had kept buried for far too long. A hidden entrance opened in the floor, slowly, with a groan of metal scraping against stone. Ryan felt the ground shift beneath his feet, as if the very earth was alive, swallowing the shack whole. The door they thought was solid was no longer a barrier. It was a gateway. Megan gasped, pulling away from Ryan as the trapdoor creaked open, revealing a narrow staircase that led down into a darkness even deeper than the canyon itself. Without thinking, Ryan stepped forward, drawn by an unknown force, the weight of the discovery pulling him into the unknown. No, Megan's voice was a whisper of panic. "Don't go down there." But Ryan didn't hear her. He was already descending, each step taking him further from the surface, further into the truth. The walls were damp, the air thick with the scent of earth and rot. He could feel the temperature drop, his breath misting in front of him as he reached the bottom of the stairs. And there, in the flickering light of his flashlight, he saw it. Cave. The same one from the photograph. The same one his family had stood in front of, oblivious to the danger lurking just behind them. The walls of the cave were lined with ancient markings, symbols Ryan didn't recognize. But what caught his eye wasn't the symbols. It was the figures carved into the stone, their eyes watching him. Watching them. The whispers from earlier grew louder, more distinct now. "You shouldn't have come here." Ryan turned, his breath catching in his throat. There, in the shadows of the cave, were figures, pale, distorted, their eyes hollow. They were watching him, their forms twisted in ways that defied explanation. "Who are you?" Ryan's voice cracked as he tried to step back, but his feet felt glued to the floor. One of the figures stepped forward, its face a mask of terror. The figure opened its mouth to speak, but no words came. Instead, the cavern echoed with a terrible, deafening screech, a sound so loud, so agonizing, it seemed to shake the very air around them. Megan screamed behind him. Ryan spun around, but the staircase was gone. The trapdoor had vanished, leaving them in the heart of the cave with no way out. A figure stepped from the shadows, its face familiar. His brother. Ryan's blood ran cold. But it wasn't his brother. It was a ghost. A memory. A warning. "They're not gone," the figure whispered, its voice a haunting echo. "They never left. And now neither will you." Ryan's pulse hammered in his ears as the cave seemed to close in around him. The walls, once ancient and mysterious, now felt suffocating, alive with the whispers that had become all too real. The figure of his brother, the ghost or whatever it was, lingered just out of reach, its eyes hollow, its expression twisted with pain. "They never left," the figure whispered again, its voice echoing off the stone walls. "And neither will you." Ryan's heart raced, his breath shallow as he turned to look at Megan, but she was frozen in place, her wide eyes locked onto the shadowy figure in front of them. The temperature had dropped. The air was thick, suffused with a cold that cut through their clothes and into their bones. The whispers grew louder, no longer just a faint sound, but a cacophony, as if the entire cave was speaking to them, warning them to leave. But there was no way out. The trapdoor had vanished. The staircase was gone. They were trapped in this hellish place, and the shadows around them moved, alive and waiting. Megan shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "Uncle Ryan, we need to get out. Now." But Ryan couldn't move. His feet felt glued to the ground, the weight of the figure's presence keeping him rooted to the spot. He could feel it now, the pulse of the canyon itself, a dark ancient force that was alive, feeding on the fear and pain of those who dared to enter. The figure of his brother took another step forward, its form flickering as if it couldn't quite maintain its shape. But the eyes were still the same. Hollow. Dead. Watching. Waiting. Suddenly the ground beneath them rumbled and Ryan staggered forward, nearly losing his footing. The entire cave seemed to shudder, as if some massive force was stirring deep within the earth. "No one leaves," the figure intoned, its voice like a death knell. Without warning, the walls of the cave began to shift. The floor cracked open beneath Ryan's feet, and he barely managed to jump back as the ground gave way, revealing an abyss of darkness below. The whispers turned into screams, and the shadows twisted and writhed, reaching for him. "It's not over, Uncle Ryan. It's just begun." Ryan turned to Megan, his eyes wild with panic. "We have to fight back. We can't let it win." But Megan was already moving, her legs shaky but determined. She sprinted toward the back of the cave, where a faint light flickered from somewhere beyond the shadows. Ryan followed her without thinking, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the narrow, collapsing tunnel. The ground beneath them continued to shake, pieces of stone and debris falling around them as the cave seemed to come alive, angry, relentless. The walls cracked open like ancient wounds, revealing glimpses of what lay inside. The shadows, the twisted figures, and something worse. As they ran, Ryan grabbed Megan's arm, pulling her along. "We can't stop now. We have to get out." The light ahead grew brighter, but it felt like it was pulling them into something even darker, something that wanted to consume them whole. The whispers were all around them now, pressing in from every direction, clawing at their minds. They were almost there. "No one leaves the canyon," the voice echoed once more. But this time Ryan didn't stop. He couldn't. They couldn't let the canyon win. The light at the end of the tunnel grew blinding, and for a moment Ryan thought they had made it. But as they reached the exit, the ground beneath them gave way again and they fell. Down. Down into the depths of the canyon, where the whispers became deafening, where the shadows stretched out to claim them, and where the truth waited, ready to consume them whole. The world around Ryan and Megan was a blur of motion, falling, tumbling, the sound of their bodies crashing into rocks filling their ears as the canyon swallowed them whole. Darkness enveloped them as they fell deeper, the abyss pulling them in, until the ground beneath them finally stopped. Ryan's head spun as he tried to catch his breath, his body aching from the fall. He groaned, pushing himself to his knees. The darkness was absolute now, thick, oppressive, the air colder than he'd ever felt it before. The ground beneath him felt unnatural, almost alive with something. He reached out for Megan, his hand brushing against her. She was beside him, shaking, her breath coming in gasps. "Uncle Ryan, what just happened? Where are we?" He didn't know. He couldn't answer her. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of the chaos they had just endured. The figures. The whispers. The shadows that moved, and the promises of the canyon that had kept them trapped. The whispers were gone now. The wind that had howled so violently in the cave had fallen silent. There was no sound here, just the suffocating stillness, and the darkness pressing in from every side. Ryan tried to stand, but his legs felt like jelly. His head was spinning, and the pressure in his chest only grew heavier with every breath. But then, just as he thought he couldn't take another moment of this suffocating silence, something flickered in the distance. A faint light. It wasn't the light from the cave. This light was different. It pulsed, weak but steady, drawing Ryan toward it, beckoning him like a distant memory. He reached out for Megan, his hand trembling. "We have to go," he whispered, though he wasn't sure why. Something deep within him urged him forward. The light flickered again, brighter now, and with every step they took toward it, the darkness seemed to pull back. It wasn't much, just a faint shimmer, but it felt like the answer to everything. As they approached, the ground underfoot began to feel less solid, the air around them growing colder still. They moved faster now, desperation filling their steps. The light was so close they could almost touch it. But as they reached the edge of the light, something shifted. The whispers returned. Not in the distance, but surrounding them. Louder now, as if the very canyon was speaking, its voice low and jagged, like broken stones scraping against each other. "You can never leave." Ryan froze. His body went cold, a shiver running down his spine. Megan turned to him, her face pale, her eyes wide with horror. No, this isn't real," Megan whispered, more to herself than to him. But Ryan could feel it now, the truth that had been buried in the darkness. Megan had lived through this before. She had escaped the canyon once as a child, but something had drawn her back. And now, as the darkness and whispers wrapped around them, she knew the truth. The canyon wasn't a place you could simply leave. It had a grip on you, and it was relentless. Ryan's heart pounded in his chest. "Megan, what's happening? What is this place?" Megan's voice dropped to a whisper, almost like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. "It's not just the canyon. Something inside it. Something that waits for you. It never lets go." Ryan's mind spun. He reached out, grabbing Megan's arm. "We can't stay here. We need to keep moving." But Megan pulled away, shaking her head. "It won't let us leave, Uncle Ryan. It never has." "Not really." Ryan turned to look around, the light from the cave still beckoning, but it felt like it was moving farther away now, like the canyon was shifting again. The whispers faded, but something was watching them. Something older than they could comprehend, something that had lived in the dark for centuries. As Ryan and Megan found themselves lost in the dark depths of the canyon once again, the atmosphere around them felt suffocating, pressing in from all sides. Megan's breath came in shallow bursts as she grasped Ryan's arm, trying to steady herself, though her mind raced with memories of the last time she'd been here, the last time she'd escaped. Ryan turned to her, desperate for answers. "What happened to you, Megan? You were here. You escaped." Megan swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "I ran. But I didn't leave. The canyon doesn't let you go. Keeps you. It makes you think you've escaped, but it's always there, waiting." Ryan's eyes searched her face for understanding. "So we can't escape?" "Not this time." Megan's face grew pale as she stepped back, her eyes fixed on the darkening tunnel ahead of them. "It's too late. The canyon's grip is already on us. It never really let me go, Ryan. It's here in everything. It's waiting to consume us. It always has." The cave seemed to close in around them as Ryan and Megan made their way through the darkness, the echoes of their footsteps bouncing off the stone walls. The whispers had returned, soft at first, then louder, more urgent, like the canyon itself was alive, breathing, watching, waiting. Ryan's chest tightened, the weight of Megan's words pressing on him. The canyon was more than just a place. It was a living, breathing force that fed on fear, on memories, on the very souls of those who ventured too deep. "Do you hear that?" Megan whispered, her voice shaking. Her eyes were wide, scanning the darkness. "It's getting closer." Ryan's heart raced. The whispers were everywhere now, swirling around them, inside their minds. They weren't just in the air. They were inside them, speaking to them, urging them forward. He reached out for Megan, pulling her closer. "We have to keep moving. We can't stop now." The narrow passage ahead of them seemed to stretch forever, the walls closing in with each step, as though the canyon was trying to swallow them whole. The air grew heavier, suffocating, and Ryan felt a cold chill running through him, as if the darkness itself was reaching out to claim him. Then, as if from nowhere, the ground beneath them gave way. Ryan barely had time to react as he tumbled forward, the earth crumbling beneath him, sending him plunging into the abyss. His body slammed against the rocks, pain shooting through him as he fell deeper and deeper, unable to stop his descent. Megan screamed his name, but it was too late. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the breath out of him. His vision swam, the world spinning around him as he struggled to stay conscious. When he finally opened his eyes, everything was dark, save for a faint flicker of light in the distance. He pushed himself to his knees, gasping for air, his body aching. "Uncle Ryan, are you okay?" Megan's voice cut through the silence. He could hear the panic in her voice, but he didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing, his thoughts jumbled as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. The light in the distance beckoned, pulling him forward. Despite the pain in his body, despite the fear clawing at his chest, he stood up, determined to find out what was waiting for them at the end of this nightmarish journey. They moved toward the light, step by step, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling their ears as they reached the source of the light. And then, in the center of the cavern, they saw it. A large stone altar, ancient and covered in moss. The air around it pulsed with a strange energy, a dark force that sent shivers down their spines. At the base of the altar were more photographs, each one depicting a member of the Williams family, their faces twisted in expressions of terror. But the worst part, the photographs weren't just of them. The figures in the shadows, the ones Ryan had seen in the cave, were in the photos too. Watching. Waiting. The figures were alive, trapped in the photographs, their eyes following them as they approached. Megan's breath caught in her throat. "This is it. This is what's been pulling us in." Ryan didn't answer. He was too focused on the altar, the center of the mystery, the place that held the answer to everything. The whispers reached a fever pitch, the voices rising to a crescendo in their minds. "You cannot leave. You cannot escape." Suddenly the ground shook. The altar trembled, its surface crackling with an otherworldly energy. Ryan stumbled backward, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was thick with pressure, like the very walls of the cavern were closing in on them. Megan grabbed his arm, her grip tight. "Uncle Ryan, we have to get out of here. Now." But it was too late. The altar erupted with a blinding flash of light, the force of it knocking them both to the ground. The light swallowed everything: Ryan, Megan, the photographs, the whispers. The canyon itself seemed to scream in agony, and then Ryan's eyes snapped open. He was lying on the cold ground, but this time there was no sound. No whispers. No shadows. Just silence. Megan was beside him, her face pale, her eyes wide with confusion. She looked at him, then around at the empty space. "What happened?" she whispered. Where are we?" Ryan didn't answer. He couldn't. He didn't know. The canyon was gone. The light, the whispers, the altar. All of it had vanished. They were alone. But something felt off. They weren't in the cave anymore. They weren't even in the canyon. They had escaped. Or had they? The last thing Ryan heard before the world around them faded to black was the faintest whisper, carried on the wind. "You're never truly free." Ryan and Megan stood in the eerie silence, their breath ragged, their minds struggling to process what had just happened. The canyon, Devil's Canyon, had taken everything from them: their families, their sanity, their peace. And though they had made it out physically, they both knew the truth now. The canyon never really lets go. It just waits patiently for those who think they can escape. Megan stared at the empty space around them, her face a mask of disbelief. "Did we make it out?" she whispered. Ryan didn't answer, his gaze lost in the distance. The canyon's grip had loosened. But not completely. They were free for now, but there was no escaping the memories, no escaping the whispers. The canyon had always been more than just a place. It was a force, alive with the history of those who'd come before them. And though Ryan and Megan had survived, the canyon's darkness would remain with them forever. But for now they were alive. They had escaped. Or had they? Did Ryan and Megan really escape? Or are they still trapped in the canyon's grip? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy this chilling mystery? Don't forget to hit that like button if you want more thrilling stories like this, and subscribe to stay updated on our latest content. And remember, the canyon might have let them go, but it's always waiting for the next soul daring enough to uncover its secrets. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay curious, and stay safe.